Selena, a dedicated gym-goer, was midway through her routine when Mark, a towering figure with a condescending smile, sauntered over. She had just finished a set of squats when he interrupted, clapping loudly enough to draw attention. "Not bad," he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge of mockery. "But your form is a little off. Mind if I show you?" Selena stiffened. She didn't need help, especially not from a man who clearly relished making himself the center of attention. "No, thank you," she replied curtly, hoping he'd take the hint. But Mark didn't. Instead, he leaned closer, his tone lowering conspiratorially as if sharing a secret. "You know, women often underestimate how important technique is. Let me guide you." "I said no," Selena interrupted, louder this time. Heads turned, some faces curious, others amused. The gym, typically her sanctuary, suddenly felt hostile. Mark's face darkened for a fraction of a second before his grin returned, wider and more unsettling. "Hey, no need to get defensive," he said, raising his hands as though she were the unreasonable one. "I'm just trying to help." Selena ignored him, moving to another machine. But Mark followed. At every station, he hovered, offering unsolicited advice, commenting on her workout choices, and throwing in backhanded compliments. The tension was palpable. Selena caught glimpses of other gym members watching, some laughing quietly, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Nobody intervened. As the harassment persisted, Selena's patience wore thin. At the bench press, Mark made his most intrusive move yet. As she adjusted the weights, he stepped behind her, too close for comfort, his breath hot against her neck. "Let me spot you," he said. His hand brushed hers. "Back off," Selena snapped, stepping away. Her voice echoed across the gym floor. Mark chuckled nervously, muttering something about women being so touchy nowadays. The gym manager finally approached, a wiry man who looked more annoyed by the commotion than concerned for Selena. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, addressing both of them but looking mostly at Selena, his tone suggesting she might be the problem. Selena explained what had happened, her voice shaking with anger. Mark interjected, laughing. "We were just having a little misunderstanding." "She's overreacting?" The manager hesitated, his gaze flickering between the two of them. He looked at Selena, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Maybe next time, just try to keep things calm," he said, the thin veneer of neutrality doing little to mask his bias. Then to Mark, "And let's keep it respectful." Mark smirked but said nothing. Selena felt her stomach churn. The entire exchange left her feeling humiliated and abandoned. She had been harassed, yet somehow, it was framed as a mutual disagreement. She grabbed her things and left, her hands trembling as she pushed open the gym door. Outside, the crisp evening air hit her face like a slap. Her sanctuary had turned into a battlefield, and she was left wondering if anyone would have acted differently if she were someone else. Selena had hoped that her abrupt departure the previous evening would signal to Mark that his behavior was unwelcome. She debated returning to the gym but ultimately decided that no man would chase her away from a space she paid to use. The next day, she walked into the gym with her head held high, determined to reclaim her workout routine. But Mark was there. He leaned against the wall near the free weights, his arms crossed and a smirk plastered across his face. The moment Selena walked in, his eyes locked on her like a predator spotting prey. She could feel his gaze burning into her back as she set her bag down and adjusted her headphones, trying to block him out. "Back for more, huh?" Mark's voice cut through the gym's ambient noise. It was loud enough to catch the attention of a few nearby gym-goers, who glanced her way and then quickly looked away, unwilling to intervene. Selena ignored him and headed toward the treadmill. As she started her run, she noticed him moving closer in her peripheral vision. He planted himself on the treadmill next to hers, walking at a slow pace. "You know," he began, loud enough for her to hear over her music, "people like you should really show a little gratitude. I'm just trying to help you out." Selena yanked out her earbuds and glared at him. "People like me? What's that supposed to mean?" Mark chuckled darkly. "You know exactly what I mean." His eyes swept over her, his tone dripping with disdain. "People who probably don't even belong here. Taking up space, thinking you're better than everyone else. I mean, come on. You don't exactly look like you're from around here. Her stomach twisted. The gym, situated in an affluent suburban area, didn't have many members who looked like Selena. Her darker skin and curly hair set her apart. She clenched her fists but stayed silent, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Mark's voice dropped, turning venomous. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or do you only know how to give attitude? Typical. Selena's heart pounded, and her hands trembled as she stepped off the treadmill. She refused to let him corner her. Moving to the weight rack, she hoped he would give up, but he followed, standing too close, his presence suffocating. You're pretty bold for someone like you, he sneered, leaning closer. But don't forget, you're not as tough as you think. Girls like you need to learn their place. Selena felt her cheeks flush, both with anger and embarrassment. She glanced around the gym, hoping someone might step in, but the other gym-goers avoided her gaze. The manager from the night before was nowhere in sight. The indifference of the crowd stung as much as Mark's words. Mark leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. You keep running that mouth and you'll regret it. Don't think I won't make your life hell if you keep disrespecting me. That was it. She couldn't take it anymore. Leave me alone, she shouted, her voice echoing across the gym floor. Heads turned, but nobody moved to help. Mark raised his hands in mock surrender, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Whoa, calm down, sweetheart. No need to get all ghetto on me, he sneered, his words laced with cruelty. You're making a scene. Selena's vision blurred with tears of rage, but she refused to let them fall. You're the one causing the problem, Mark. Stay the hell away from me. Mark laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Big words for someone who doesn't even belong here. You think anyone's going to back you up? Look around. He gestured to the silent gym-goers, most of whom were deliberately looking anywhere but at the confrontation. You're on your own, princess. The humiliation of being ignored and the weight of Mark's words settled heavily on her chest. Her breathing quickened, and she knew she needed to leave before the situation escalated further. Grabbing her bag, she made her way toward the exit, her legs trembling with adrenaline and fear. As she pushed through the glass doors, she heard Mark call after her, his voice dripping with menace. Better watch yourself, Selena. You never know who's watching. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap, and she leaned against the wall, her hands shaking as she tried to catch her breath. Her safe space had become a war zone, and Mark had made it clear that he wasn't going to stop. The fight had spilled out of the gym and into her life, and Selena realized that she couldn't ignore it any longer. Something had to be done, but she wasn't sure where to begin. Selena spent the night tossing and turning, replaying Mark's threats over and over in her mind. The humiliation of the previous day burned deep, but beneath the shame was a simmering anger she couldn't suppress. She had spent years in the military, training her body and mind to handle high-pressure situations. And yet, here she was, feeling powerless against a bully who seemed to thrive on making her life miserable. By morning, Selena made up her mind. She wasn't going to let him dictate her movements or scare her away from her gym. As she stepped through the doors that morning, her jaw was set, and her eyes blazed with determination. The gym was busy, but Selena spotted Mark almost immediately. He was by the free weights, joking loudly with a few others. His eyes lit up when he noticed her, his smirk widening. It was as if he had been waiting for her, feeding on the conflict he'd created. Back again? Mark called out, his voice carrying across the gym. The volume of his taunt ensured that everyone nearby heard him. Guess you just can't stay away. You must like the attention. Selena ignored him, heading straight to the treadmill. Her military instincts told her not to engage unless necessary. She started her warm-up, her ears tuned to his movements. Sure enough, within minutes, Mark was beside her, his imposing frame blocking her view of the room. You really should say thank you, he sneered. I mean, it's not every day someone takes time out of their workout to help someone like you. Selena clenched her fists but kept running. Leave me alone, Mark. This is your last warning. Mark laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Warning? What are you gonna do, tough girl? Report me? Who's gonna believe you? He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You're just some loud-mouthed girl who doesn't know her place. Nobody here cares about you. Hell, they probably think you're the problem. Selena stopped the treadmill abruptly, her pulse racing, not from the run, but from the boiling rage building inside her. She stepped off, ready to walk away, but Mark grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Don't walk away from me," he snarled, his voice losing its mocking edge and turning into something darker, more menacing. "You think you can just talk to me like that and get away with it?" The gym seemed to freeze. Selena saw the shock on a few faces, but nobody moved to intervene. That moment of inaction told her everything she needed to know. She was on her own. But that was fine. Mark's grip tightened, and a split second later, Selena's instincts kicked in. Years of military training surged to the forefront of her mind, and she shifted her weight, grabbing his wrist with both hands. In one fluid motion, she twisted his arm, forcing him to release her as he stumbled forward. "Let go of me," Selena demanded, her voice commanding and sharp. But Mark didn't back down. His embarrassment quickly turned to fury, and he lunged at her. The air in the gym was electric, the sound of gasps and shuffling feet echoing as people backed away from the unfolding scene. Selena didn't hesitate. As he reached for her again, she stepped to the side, hooking her foot behind his ankle and using his momentum against him. Mark's body lurched forward, and he hit the ground hard, his breath whooshing out in a pained grunt. He scrambled to get up, his face red with anger and humiliation, but Selena was faster. Before he could make another move, she pinned him down with a knee pressed firmly into his back. "Enough," she barked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the gym. "If you ever touch me again, I'll make sure you regret it." Mark struggled beneath her, his voice a low growl. "Get off me, you crazy—" "Shut up," Selena snapped, her voice steel. "You've harassed me, insulted me, and now you've assaulted me. You're done." The sound of her words seemed to break the spell over the gym. People began to murmur, their shocked whispers spreading like wildfire. A few bold individuals took out their phones, recording the scene. The gym manager finally appeared, his face pale as he approached cautiously. "What's going on here?" he demanded, though his voice trembled slightly. Selena stood, her breathing steady, and pointed at Mark, who was still lying on the ground, clutching his side. "He grabbed me. He's been harassing me for days, and nobody here has done a damn thing about it." Mark glared up at her, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the attention. "She attacked me," he yelled, his voice cracking. "She's crazy." The manager hesitated, his eyes darting between Selena and Mark. Selena could see the calculation in his expression, the fear of taking sides. But the growing crowd, now armed with video evidence, left him little choice. "Mark," the manager said finally, his voice firming. "You need to leave." "No." Mark's face twisted with rage. "Are you serious?" "Leave," the manager repeated, cutting him off. "Or I'll call the police." Mark staggered to his feet, his confidence in shreds. He pointed a shaking finger at Selena. "This isn't over," he hissed before storming out of the gym. Selena stood tall, her body still thrumming with adrenaline. The room was silent, all eyes on her. For the first time, the bystanders who had done nothing seemed to realize their complicity. A few offered murmured apologies or words of support, but Selena brushed them off. She didn't need their sympathy. She had reclaimed her space and her dignity, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it from her again. The gym was still buzzing with an electric tension after Mark's humiliating exit. Selena stood near the weight rack, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, their gazes a mix of curiosity, admiration, and unease. The silence that hung in the air was finally broken by a hesitant, scattered clap from someone near the treadmills. It grew louder as others joined in. A few gym-goers even cheered, their voices ringing out in the space that moments ago had been filled with Mark's venomous taunts. "You showed him," one man shouted, grinning and giving her a thumbs up. Selena didn't acknowledge the applause. She wasn't interested in being anyone's hero, especially not in a room full of people who had stood by and done nothing while Mark's harassment escalated. She locked eyes with a woman standing near the free weights who had recorded the entire confrontation. The woman's phone was still pointed at Selena, the screen capturing her every move. "What are you doing?" Selena asked, her voice sharp. "This isn't some reality show." The woman lowered her phone, looking sheepish. "Sorry, I just thought, well, people should see what you did. You were amazing." "I didn't do it to entertain anyone," Selena snapped. "I did it because nobody else was willing to step in." Her words landed like a slap across the room. The scattered cheers faded, replaced by an awkward hush. People shifted uncomfortably, a few pretending to busy themselves with their workouts. Selena's eyes swept across the gym, her frustration boiling over. "Where was all this energy when he was harassing me for days?" she demanded. "Where were the claps then?" The weight of her accusation hung in the air. The man who had cheered earlier avoided her gaze, suddenly fascinated by his shoelaces. The woman with the phone stammered, "I didn't think it was my place." "Not your place?" Selena repeated, her voice rising. "You stood there and watched him threaten me. You all did. And now, after it's over, you want to act like you care." A young guy by the squat rack cleared his throat. "Look, I didn't know it was that serious. I thought maybe you two just had some kind of argument." Selena's laugh was bitter. "An argument? Did it look like an argument when he grabbed me?" He didn't answer, his face turning red as he turned back to his weights. The few who had been recording the incident began hastily tucking their phones away, their earlier enthusiasm now replaced with guilt. The gym manager, who had watched the entire exchange from a distance, finally stepped forward. He looked pale and visibly shaken, as though he realized how badly he'd mishandled the situation. "Selena," he began, but she cut him off. "Don't," she said coldly. "You saw what he was doing yesterday, and you did nothing. Today, he escalated, and you still didn't step in until everyone was watching. You let him harass me, and you only cared when your reputation was on the line." The manager swallowed hard. "You're right. I should have handled it better. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it," Selena shot back. "How many other people has he harassed here? How many others have you ignored because it was easier than dealing with it?" A woman near the ellipticals raised her hand tentatively. "He's made comments to me before," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing as bad as what he did to you, but, yeah, he's always been creepy." Selena turned to the woman, her anger softening slightly. "Why didn't you say anything?" The woman looked down at her feet. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." The admission sent a fresh wave of anger through Selena. "That's the problem," she said, addressing the room. "People like him get away with this because we don't hold them accountable. We let them get comfortable thinking they can treat anyone however they want, and we do nothing." The crowd was silent, her words hitting home for many. A few people nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Others looked uncomfortable, unwilling to confront their own complicity. One man, an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair, stepped forward. "You're right," he said, his voice firm. "We all failed you today. And we failed ourselves by letting someone like him think he could get away with that." Selena met his gaze, appreciating the sincerity in his tone. But she wasn't ready to let the gym off the hook. Mark isn't the only problem here. He might be gone, but this place has a culture that allowed him to thrive. Until that changes, people like him will keep coming back. The manager nodded slowly. "We'll do better," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Selena picked up her gym bag, slinging it over her shoulder. She glanced back at the crowd, her expression hard. "You all need to think about what you'll do next time you see someone being harassed. Because there will be a next time." With that, she turned and walked out of the gym. The applause that had greeted her victory had disappeared, replaced by a heavy, reflective silence. As Selena pushed through the glass doors and into the cold evening air, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and empowerment. She hadn't won just for herself. She had forced the gym to confront its own failures, leaving them to grapple with the uncomfortable truth: they had been complicit. And now they had no choice but to face it. Selena's heart was still racing when she stepped out into the biting cold air. Her breath formed faint clouds in front of her as she walked briskly to her car, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. Every muscle in her body was taut, not from her workout, but from the storm of emotions swirling inside her: anger, humiliation, and a faint trace of pride. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to collect herself. Her reflection in the rearview mirror showed more than just the sweat from her workout. It showed the traces of someone who had been holding back for far too long. As she stared at herself, memories surfaced, unbidden but vivid. The yelling of instructors. The crash of waves on dark waters. The cold metal of a rifle against her palm. The words, sharp and unrelenting, drilled into her from her time in the Navy SEALs. Stay calm. Stay focused. Control your breathing. In the chaos, you must remain the eye of the storm. Selena let out a shaky breath, leaning back against the headrest. The training that had carried her through some of the most dangerous missions overseas was the only reason she had managed to keep her composure while facing Mark's aggression. The man who thought he could intimidate her didn't know he was dealing with someone who had faced far worse and come out stronger. 2 years earlier, she had completed her time with the SEALs. Selena had been one of the few women to make it through the grueling training, earning the respect of her team through grit, discipline, and unyielding determination. Her service had taken her to places most people only read about in headlines. War zones. Hostage rescues. Critical operations where every second could mean the difference between life and death. But back then, she hadn't been Selena, the woman on the treadmill being taunted by a bully. She had been Ghost, a call sign she earned for her ability to blend seamlessly into any environment, striking when least expected. She had thrived under pressure, her calm demeanor a shield against the chaos around her. What no one in the gym realized, what Mark certainly hadn't known, was that Selena had once stared down men with weapons trained on her and still managed to hold her nerve. She'd led teams through hostile territory, trusting her instincts and training to guide them back safely. And now, back home, she was being forced to summon that same calm to deal with someone as small and pitiful as Mark. The gym confrontation replayed in her mind as she started the engine, the memory of Mark's sneer making her grip the wheel tighter. What had stung the most wasn't just his words, it was the crowd. The bystanders who had done nothing. The manager who had hesitated until it was almost too late. And the sickening realization that Mark had targeted her not just because she was a woman, but because of her race. "You're not from around here," he'd said, and Selena knew exactly what he'd meant. The predominantly white gym, with its polished machines and curated playlists, didn't have many members who looked like her. She had always felt the subtle stares, the way some people seemed to hesitate before speaking to her. But she'd brushed it off, focusing on her workouts and letting her presence speak for itself. Mark's taunts had made it impossible to ignore. He had singled her out, weaponizing her difference, trying to shrink her into a stereotype. But Selena was no stranger to this kind of treatment. She had faced it before, even in the military. The whispers, the doubts, the insinuations that she didn't belong in such an elite unit. She thought of the drill sergeant who had pulled her aside during training. "You're strong, Davis," he had said, his voice low and firm. "But out there, you'll need to be more than strong. They'll look at you and see two things you can't change: your gender and your skin. They'll try to use it against you. Don't let them. Prove them wrong every damn time." Those words had fueled her through training and beyond. And tonight they gave her clarity. Mark's racism wasn't a reflection of her, it was a reflection of his own smallness. His inability to handle someone who defied his expectations. Selena parked in front of her apartment building, but she didn't go inside right away. Instead, she sat in the car, replaying the moment she'd put Mark on the ground. It hadn't been just about defending herself. It had been a release, a reminder of her own strength. And yet, she knew that moment wasn't the end. Mark's parting words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. He might try to escalate things. Men like him, with fragile egos, didn't take kindly to being humiliated. But she wasn't afraid. She would be prepared, just as she had been in every mission she'd undertaken. If he tried to retaliate, he'd find himself facing someone who wasn't just a gym-goer. He'd be up against Ghost. What troubled her more than Mark's threats was the gym itself. The way the manager had hesitated. The way the crowd had stayed silent until it was safe to clap. Selena's fight wasn't just with Mark, it was with the culture that enabled him. the subtle racism, the bystander apathy, the unspoken rule that people like her had to prove they belonged over and over again. As she finally stepped into her apartment, Selena knew she couldn't let this go. She had fought too hard, both in the military and in life, to let someone like Mark make her feel small. Her hand brushed over her dog tags, now hanging on the wall next to a framed photo of her SEAL team. She had faced worse and emerged victorious. Selena sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. She began drafting an email to the gym's corporate office, detailing everything that had happened, sparing no detail. She would ensure that Mark's actions, and the gym's failure to act, were documented. And if nothing came of it, she'd take it further. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for anyone who had ever been made to feel unwelcome, anyone who had been told they didn't belong. This wasn't just about reclaiming her gym. It was about sending a message. Selena Davis wasn't someone you could intimidate. Not in the gym, not in life, not anywhere. Selena's story didn't end the night she faced Mark. What followed was a ripple effect that spread throughout the gym and beyond, leaving a mark on everyone who had witnessed the confrontation or heard about it afterward. Mark's words and actions had cut deep, not just for Selena but for those who stood by and did nothing. For the first time, the regulars at the gym were forced to confront their own silence. The next morning, Selena returned to the gym with the same resolve she carried onto the battlefield. She wasn't there to make a scene. She wasn't there to bask in the aftermath of her confrontation with Mark. She just wanted to reclaim her routine, to remind herself that no one, not even a bully armed with prejudice, could dictate her life. But as she walked in, she noticed something different. The usual hum of machines and chatter was subdued. People glanced at her, some nodding hesitantly, others averting their eyes. A few bold enough to approach offered quiet apologies. "I'm sorry for not stepping in," a woman said, wringing her hands nervously. It was the same woman who had filmed the encounter. "I didn't know what to do. I should have done something sooner." Selena studied her, her expression unreadable. "It's not about knowing what to do," she said after a pause. "It's about deciding to act, even when it's uncomfortable." The woman nodded, her cheeks flushed with shame. Selena could tell she wasn't the only one feeling that way. There was a palpable tension in the air, a collective reckoning among the gym-goers who had watched Mark harass her day after day and said nothing. They were forced to see themselves in the mirror of their inaction. The gym manager approached her later that day, looking more nervous than contrite. "Selena," he began, fumbling with his words, I wanted to apologize. I should have handled things better. I didn't realize how bad it was." Selena raised an eyebrow. "You didn't realize? He was harassing me in front of everyone. How could you not realize?" "I thought it would blow over," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to make things worse." Selena's lips tightened into a thin line. "You didn't want to make things worse for who? For him? Or for yourself?" The manager had no answer, and Selena didn't wait for one. She turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in the discomfort of his own failure. She wasn't interested in platitudes or half-hearted apologies. What mattered was action, real change. The story of what had happened spread quickly. The gym members who had recorded the confrontation shared the videos online, and they went viral within days. Selena hadn't wanted to be the center of attention, but the footage resonated with people. Comments flooded in, with many praising her strength and courage. Others condemned the bystanders for their passivity and called out the gym's failure to create a safe environment. The incident sparked discussions about racism, harassment, and the responsibility to intervene. For many, it was an uncomfortable but necessary conversation. People began to see themselves in the bystanders, paralyzed by uncertainty, too afraid to act, and realized the cost of their silence. As for Selena, she refused to let herself become a passive figure in the aftermath. She continued to show up at the gym, her presence a reminder of what had happened and a challenge to anyone who thought they could ignore it. She also kept pressure on the gym's management, demanding changes that would protect members from future harassment. Under her insistence, the gym implemented mandatory training for staff on how to handle harassment and discrimination. They posted clear policies about zero tolerance for abusive behavior. And perhaps most importantly, they created a culture where people felt empowered to speak up when they saw injustice. The regulars at the gym began to change too. The woman who had filmed the incident started greeting Selena with a smile each morning, often joining her for workouts. The young guy by the squat rack, who had once awkwardly looked away, made a point to speak up when he saw a man bothering another woman at the gym. Even the older gentleman who had admitted the group's collective failure took it upon himself to mentor younger members, teaching them the importance of respect. Mark's absence became a symbol of what they had all learned. For Selena, his departure wasn't just about removing a toxic presence. It was about proving that resilience, self-control, and standing your ground could affect real change. One day, as Selena finished her workout, a woman approached her. She was new to the gym, her dark skin and curly hair strikingly similar to Selena's. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. "I saw the video. It gave me the courage to come back to the gym after I stopped going because of someone like him." Selena felt a lump rise in her throat. She nodded, her voice steady but soft. "You don't need to thank me. Just don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." The woman smiled, her shoulders relaxing. "Because of you, I won't." The gym never went back to the way it was before. The confrontation became a turning point, a story retold among members as a lesson in courage and accountability. People began to look out for each other, stepping in when they saw something wrong instead of turning a blind eye. Selena didn't see herself as a hero. She had faced bigger battles, both overseas and within herself. But the gym became a new kind of battlefield, one where she showed people the power of resilience and self-respect. And while the scars of the confrontation lingered, they were a reminder of something greater, the cost of silence and the power of speaking up. In the end, Selena didn't just change her gym, she reminded everyone around her that respect wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity.